Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we really plunge headfirst into some compelling sources, pulling out the most important bits of knowledge and insight to, well, get you instantly well informed. Today, we're tackling a topic that honestly challenges some really fundamental assumptions. Assumptions about progress, about value, about what it even means to thrive. We're going to be unpacking some incredibly potent ideas from Philip Lilien's work. Specifically, we're looking at degrowth, reversing the landfill economy through coherence, and also the landfill economy and the path to degrowth. So our mission today, it's to really deconstruct this powerful concept Lilien calls the landfill economy. We want to understand its core mechanisms, its inherent flaws, and what he sees as its deeply destructive logic. And then after that, we'll turn to the alternative he proposes. It sounds radical, but maybe hopeful too. It's called degrowth. But he frames it, interestingly, not as going backward, but as a path to something he calls recoherence, like restoring balance. So get ready for some, I think, surprising facts and probably a few genuine aha moments. We're exploring an idea that feels, well, pretty counterintuitive to many of us. It's not just economics, is it? It's about shifting how we even see reality.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, this isn't just about tweaking economic theories or, adjusting policies here and there. It goes much deeper. Lillian's really asking us to look at the very root of our thinking, how we define what's real, what truly holds value, how the world actually works. Because these underlying beliefs, they fundamentally shape our economy, our whole society. He used the term ontology for this. Basically, our system's underlying beliefs about reality. And he argues that our current economic setup, it's running on a flawed understanding of reality. So a real lasting shift needs us to reevaluate those foundational beliefs. We're not just looking at the what of the landfill economy, but the why, the very nature of it, and what a change might actually look like. It sets us up for a pretty profound discussion, I think.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Where do we start?
Right, so we're diving straight into Lillien's critique of, well, the current economic way of doing things, what he calls the landfill economy. And he really doesn't hold back. He immediately grabs your attention with this description of neoliberalism. He calls it a quasi-religious asymmetry field. I mean, just pause on that phrase, quasi-religious. He's arguing it's not just an economic system based on, rational principles. It's presented more like a belief system, almost a faith, with its own sacred ideas, its own unquestionable rules.
Exactly. And within this quasi-religious asymmetry field, Lilien says that economic growth, is treated as the sacrament.
A sacrament, wow.
Yeah. So growth isn't just something desirable, it's elevated. It's like the Holy Grail, something you must pursue almost without question. It's the central ritual of this economic faith, you could say. And who oversees this? Well, he calls financiers the priests, implying they're the ones who interpret and enforce this belief system, guiding the market rituals. They're the gatekeepers, deciding what gets blessed based on its contribution to growth. And the whole stage for this,
the global market. He labels that the altar. It's a really vivid analogy, isn't it? It shows how deeply embedded, how almost worshipped this pursuit of endless growth has become. He says it's not just encouraged, it's demanded. It's like a core belief, not just a policy. And the implication of this ideology, according to Lilien, is huge. He says it demands monetization. It's not optional, it's fundamental. He has this striking line. Every tree, drop of water, gene, or human activity must be translated into value for profit extraction.
Everything has to have a price tag, basically.
Pretty much. Anything and everything, no matter its intrinsic worth or its role in, sustaining life, it gets reduced to a commodity. Something quantifiable, something you can put on a spreadsheet so profit can be pulled from it. And Lilien argues this isn't really holistic economics. He calls it a reductionist ontology masquerading as logic.
Okay, break that down. Reductionist ontology masquerading as logic.
Right. So he means it presents itself as logical, as the only rational way to organize things. But underneath, it's built on a really narrow, and he argues ultimately destructive way of understanding reality itself. It reduces the incredible complexity of life, of society, into these isolated little units, each with a price. And the outcome, he warns, isn't real lasting prosperity. It's progressive coherence collapse.
Coherence collapse.
The slow, insidious breakdown of those vital systems and values that you just can't easily monetize right now. Think about it. If you can't put a price on something easily, what happens in this system?
It becomes invisible or worthless.
Exactly. Invisible, or at least devalued. Things like community bonds, social cohesion, or the quiet resilience of a healthy ecosystem. Traditional knowledge, cultural heritage. These things are systematically pushed aside if they can't generate immediate quantifiable profit. It's like the system is slowly losing its internal integrity because it's ignoring the invisible connections that actually hold it together.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to run a family purely on financial transactions. It would just fall apart, right? That's coherence collapse on a small scale. And this leads us right to his coherence principle. This is really key to his argument. He says, a system that only values the measurable will destroy the immeasurable foundations upon which it depends.
Okay, that sounds important. Only values the measurable, destroys the
Yeah.
immeasurable foundation.
It really is critical. It means our economy, by focusing almost solely on quantifiable stuff, on monetary value, it actively undermines the very things that aren't easily measured but are absolutely essential. Essential for long-term survival, for well-being. Think about those immeasurable foundations he hints at, like the complex processes in nature, those hidden fungi networks in forests, the oceans absorbing carbon, clean air, clean water. We don't buy these things directly in the market, do we? But without them.
Life stops, yeah.
Right. Or think about social trust, community bonds. How do you put a price on people trusting each other, working together? But society falls apart without it. Or traditional knowledge systems, generations of wisdom about how to live sustainably in a place. The market struggles to value that until maybe it can be turned into a product. So our current system, by ignoring or devaluing these things because they don't fit the measurable box, is basically consuming its own roots. It's eating away at the very ground it stands on.
Wow, so pulling that all together, it means that by just chasing GDP, chasing the stuff we can count easily, we might actually be actively wrecking the things that truly keep us going, ecologically, socially, culturally. It's a pretty stark warning, isn't it, that what we choose to value shapes our reality, often in ways we don't intend, and maybe ways that are really destructive. This idea of coherence collapse is, yeah, it's unsettling, like a machine ignoring the oil it needs to run. Okay, so Lilien takes this critique even deeper. He argues it's not just neoliberalism or the focus on growth. He says the very nature of markets themselves is fundamentally flawed. This is where it gets really interesting, maybe a bit uncomfortable. He says markets operate on present moment monetized transactionality. Can you unpack that phrase for us?
Sure. When he says markets operate on present moment monetized transactionality, he means they're fundamentally designed for exchanges happening right now for a specific money price. This focus on the immediate transaction makes them really efficient for certain things, obviously, buying groceries, selling widgets, but it also creates huge blind spots. It limits what they can actually see and value. Lilien points out three really big limitations here. First, and this is huge, markets cannot price the future.
Cannot price the future. What does that mean practically?
It means they really struggle to account for long-term impacts, especially impacts that go beyond the usual business cycle or investment timeframe. Think about climate change.
Okay.
The future costs, rising sea levels, massive storms, migrations, ecosystem collapse. How does today's market price that into, say, the cost of gasoline? It's incredibly hard. Those costs are spread out, they're uncertain in timing, they affect future generations who aren't part of today's transaction. So something that causes massive future harm, like burning fossil fuels, can look really profitable now because those future costs just aren't in the equation. We're basically building up this huge intergenerational debt that the market doesn't register. Second, he says markets cannot account for nested interdependency.
Nested interdependency, like how everything's connected.
Exactly. The incredibly complex, interwoven relationships within nature, within society. Markets tend to break things down, right? Look at individual components, individual deals, not the whole web. Take a rainforest, for example. Its market value might be seen as timber or land for cattle, things you can sell now. But its real value is way beyond that. It regulates climate globally, it holds biodiversity, it generates rainfall for farms far away, for potential future medicines.
Stuff you can't easily sell off piece by piece.
Right. A logging contract for one section just cannot capture that huge nested value. It sees the immediate extractable bit, and the rest is sort of irrelevant to the transaction. It's like looking at individual bricks without seeing the whole building they make up. And third, markets cannot value things that cannot be owned or extracted. This is really profound.
Things that can't be owned.
Yeah.
Like clean air.
Exactly. Clean air, public knowledge, the beauty of a landscape. If you can't put a fence around it, divide it up, and sell it as property, the market essentially gives it a value of zero. Lilien points out that natural systems, rainforests, those fungi networks, ancestral knowledge, they just do not conform to supply and demand logic. They don't fit the model. And because they don't fit, they get labeled externalities. That's the jargon. It means the huge costs or benefits associated with them are treated as outside the main economic calculation, ignored or pushed onto society or the future.
So the system ignores its own foundations.
That's how Lilien puts it, starkly. The operating system of the world treats its foundations as irrelevant, which leads to that uncomfortable question. If our main organizing system treats its own life support as irrelevant, what does that mean for stability, for the long haul? It suggests a deep systemic flaw, like we're building this incredibly complex machine, but ignoring the fundamental laws of physics it needs to obey.
And Lillian's conclusion from all this is pretty blunt, isn't it? He says no fix exists within this logic. He's not saying we just need better regulations or carbon taxes.
No, he's much more radical than that.
Yeah.
He argues that attempts to internalize those externalities, trying to put a price on carbon or value ecosystem services, he sees those as token gestures that become alibis for continued exploitation.
Alibis.
Yeah.
Wow, so they look like solutions but actually allow the problem to continue.
That's his argument, that these fixes, however well-intentioned, ultimately legitimize the core extractive system because they still force everything into that flawed market framework. They try to put a price on the priceless. It's like trying to solve addiction by regulating the supply rather than addressing the underlying causes of the addiction itself. It highlights just how radical his critique is. He's calling for a whole new logic, not just tweaks to the old one.
Okay, so we've got the critique of neoliberalism, the limits of markets, but then he throws another curveball, challenging something many see as part of the solution, renewables. He calls this the Rebuildables trap. He says calling things like solar panels or wind turbines renewable is a dangerous misnomer. That's a big statement, cutting against the grain of a lot of environmental hope. Why is he so critical?
Yeah, it really does challenge those hopes directly. Lilien argues that these technologies, solar panels, wind turbines, batteries, they are not renewable in any coherent, energetic, or material sense. He proposes a different term, rebuildables.
Rebuildables, not renewables. What's the key difference there?
Well, renewable suggests something that replenishes itself naturally, right? Like sunlight, wind, or maybe timber, if managed sustainably. But these technologies don't replenish themselves. They have finite lifespans, maybe 20, 30 years. Then they wear out, degrade, and need to be completely replaced. And that replacement, that rebuilding process, is far from clean or self-sustaining. He details exactly why he calls them rebuildables. Their whole life cycle is incredibly resource and energy intensive. Each generation needs rare earth mining, which is pretty destructive in itself, right? Highly destructive.
Yeah.
Often. Habitat loss, water pollution, huge energy use. Then you need fossil fuel intensive metallurgy to process those raw materials into components that takes vast amounts of energy, usually from coal, oil, or gas. And finally, you have these complex hydrocarbon powered supply chains moving materials and components all over the globe, from mines to factories to the installation sites, which leads to the central paradox he highlights, and it's pretty startling. Each generation of green technology must be rebuilt using the same destructive infrastructure it claims to replace.
Wait, say that again. We're rebuilding the green stuff using the dirty infrastructure.
That's his point. The system powering their creation, the mining, the fossil fuels for processing, the global transport, it's the same system they're meant to replace. So he argues they don't actually transcend the landfill economy. They kind of perpetuate its core extractive logic, just for a different product. They still demand this massive, continuous throughput of finite materials and energy.
That really forces you to look beyond the label, doesn't it? Beyond renewable to the actual materials and energy involved.
Absolutely. It challenges that comforting narrative. And he suggests this model leads to entropic acceleration. Entropy is basically the tendency towards disorder, waste, decay. In this context, it means the huge energy and resource cost of constantly extracting, making, deploying, and then replacing these rebuildables. It just accelerates the very problems we're trying to solve. Resource depletion, waste generation, systemic incoherence. It's this continuous, energy-hungry cycle. Extract, manufacture, use, dispose, then extract and manufacture again for the next generation. He argues this isn't a truly sustainable path if the underlying extractive system, the demand for constant growth, stays the same.
So just swapping energy sources isn't enough if the fundamental economic engine demanding more and more stuff remains unchanged.
That seems to be his core argument here. It suggests we might be solving one problem, like carbon emissions from energy generation, but potentially creating others related to resource depletion, mining impacts, and waste if we don't change the underlying system of consumption and disposal.
So if our big solutions still rely so heavily on the very systems we want to escape, what does that mean long term? Are we just rearranging the deck chairs on the landfill Titanic, as you said earlier? It forces a really uncomfortable look at what sustainability actually requires. And this all ties back to his main concept, the landfill economy itself. He frames it not just as, having too much waste, but as something deeper, a system of planned obsolescence masquerading as progress. That's a really powerful framing, suggesting the waste isn't an accident, it's part of the design, essential for growth.
Precisely. Lilien argues the landfill economy runs on this techno-utopian dream, the belief that we will endlessly replace infrastructure, devices, and vehicles on an ever-improving curve. This vision of constant upgrades, always newer, faster, better. But then he just dismantles this with the sheer material impossibility of it all. He uses concrete examples to show the scale, like transportation. He points out the impossibility of sustainably replacing 500 million vehicles every generation.
500 million vehicles every generation. The materials alone.
Exactly. The mining for steel, aluminum, copper, lithium, the manufacturing energy, the disposal of billions of tons of old cars. It's just mind-bogglingly huge and unsustainable. It links right back to that Rebuildables trap, but scaled up to society. We can't just swap out the entire world's infrastructure every few decades without basically bankrupting the planet's resources. He also tackles recycling, which many people see as the answer, right? But he notes that recycling is neither fully closed loop nor energetically viable at scale.
Not fully closed loop, meaning stuff doesn't get perfectly reused.
Right. It often gets downcycled into lower quality materials. So you still need new virgin materials coming into the system. Plus, collecting, sorting, processing, it all takes significant energy. It's rarely a perfect circle where everything gets reused infinitely without loss or energy input. So waste is still generated, resources are still depleted, the system is still fundamentally linear, take, make, dispose, even if we bend that line a bit with recycling. His stark reminder, resources are finite, so is coherence. We're hitting limits on both the physical stuff and the system's integrity.
So the landfill economy is this vicious cycle.
A feedback loop of entropic acceleration, as he calls it. Waste, resource depletion, short-term innovation, they all feed each other, driving the system faster towards disorder, decay, and consuming its own foundations. This is why he makes that really profound statement. What we call growth is often the visible expression of invisible collapse.
Invisible collapse, meaning the damage is happening underneath the surface of the economic numbers.
Exactly. The GDP might be going up, we might see new technologies, more consumption. But underneath, we could be losing natural capital, breaking social bonds, losing ecological resilience. The growth masks a deeper degradation. This incoherence, he says, shows up as deficits. A deficit in relational integrity, connections breaking down between people or people and nature. A deficit in long-term thinking obsession with immediate profit. A deficit in ecological embeddedness, the economy acting as if it's separate from the earth. It's not just about physical trash piling up. It's a fundamental misalignment with the principles that actually sustain life. An economy basically designed to consume itself.
Wow. Okay. So the landfill economy. It's about a flawed design, a systemic blindness that mistakes consumption for progress, leading us down a path of accelerating decay. It really flips the script on what progress might mean, right? So after that pretty thorough dismantling of the landfill economy, Lilien presents his alternative, his proposed antidote, degrowth. Now that word, it definitely pushes buttons, doesn't it? It makes people think of recession, hardship, going backward.
It absolutely does. It's a provocative term, and Lilien knows that. But he's very quick to clarify. He states explicitly, degrowth is not anti-progress. That's crucial. Instead, he reframes it. It's not about reduction just for the sake of it. He defines it as recoherence.
Recoherence, bringing things back into balance, into harmony.
Exactly. It's positioned as a positive restorative process, restoring functional integrity, systemic harmony to how we live, how we organize ourselves. It's about quality, not just quantity shrinking. He breaks down what this recoherence actually involves. It's a transformative vision, really. First, he says it means a deliberate withdrawal from incoherent extraction. So it's not just cutting back randomly. It's about consciously, strategically stepping back from activities that are inherently destructive and unsustainable.
Like stopping the things that cause that coherence collapse we talked about.
Precisely. Stopping destructive mining, polluting industries, making stuff designed to break. Choosing to stop doing things that undermine well-being and planetary health, and redirecting that energy, maybe towards, say, local food systems instead of global ones with huge footprints. Second, recoherence involves a shift from throughput to durability. Throughput is that constant flow, raw materials in, products out, waste out, the landfill economy model. The shift to durability means completely rethinking how we design, make, and relate to things, designing for longevity, for repairability, for things to be cherished and last generations, directly fighting planned obsolescence. Think heirloom tools versus disposable gadgets.
So quality over quantity becomes central.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And thirdly, it's a transformation from technological novelty to systemic intelligence. This isn't anti-technology. It's about moving beyond just chasing the newest gadget without thinking about the whole system impact. It's about applying real intelligence, real wisdom to the entire system. How do the parts interact? How do we design for overall health, resilience, coherence, using technology appropriately, thoughtfully, not just innovating for innovation's sake, like designing manufacturing that mimics ecosystems, maybe.
Okay, so what does this look like practically? Producing less.
Producing less, but valuing more, as he puts it. A total reorientation. Focus shifts from maximizing sheer volume units produced, services rendered, to maximizing the intrinsic value, the longevity, the positive impact of what we do create. Quality over quantity, meaning over volume. And critically, designing for generations, not quarters. Challenging that short-term profit cycle. Thinking long-term, considering the well-being of those who come after us centuries from now.
Designing for generations. That's a huge shift from quarterly reports.
Massive. Imagine city planners thinking 100, 200 years ahead for infrastructure. He stresses this isn't about austerity. It's about changing our definition of wealth, moving from just material stuff to enduring relationships and ecological health, prioritizing the legacy we leave.
So it's about breaking that link where efficiency means disposable, and instead creating what he calls a resonance field, where the economy actually serves life, not the other way around. It really is flipping the script entirely, isn't it? Aligning ourselves with nature's limits and rhythms.
Okay, so to make this recoherence happen, Lilien doesn't just leave it at abstract ideas. He proposes a concrete framework. Holonomic economics. This is where it can become practical, right? Redefining value, redefining production.
Exactly. Holonomics is presented as the coherence economic framework to guide this shift. And it starts with a radical redefinition of value. Forget just the price tag. He proposes a new equation. Value, resonant longevity, inter-relational integrity, est time depth.
Okay, let's break that down. Resonant longevity. It's about how long something lasts. But more than just physically. It's about how long it continues to provide benefit, to resonate positively within its context, instead of quickly becoming useless waste. Think of a well-made tool passed down generations versus a cheap plastic toy that breaks in a day. One has high resonant longevity.
Got it. Then interrelational integrity.
This looks at how well something supports healthy connections. Connections between people, communities, and crucially, between us and the natural world. Does an activity build community bonds? Does it strengthen ecosystems or degrade them? It prioritizes the quality of relationships over just the output. A local farmer's market might score high here compared to a complex global supply chain.
Makes sense. And the last one, time depth.
This brings in the long-term view explicitly, valuing things that consider future generations, that draw on ancestral wisdom. Does an action benefit only us right now, or does it contribute to a flourishing future? Does it respect long-term consequences over short-term gains? This forces decisions about resources, infrastructure, even culture, to look far beyond the immediate.
So that whole equation completely shifts what we consider valuable away from just money or short-term utility.
Absolutely. And holonomics also redefines production. It's not about consumption driving things anymore. The equation becomes production, regenerative participation, not consumption.
Regenerative participation, meaning?
Meaning the focus is on activities that actively help renew and heal systems. Human, social, ecological. Contributing back, not just taking and wasting. This translates into things like regenerative design, not linear output. Designing products to be part of a cycle, maybe becoming nutrients or materials for something else, not just trash. Think buildings that clean air, products that biodegrade harmlessly. And instead of measuring success with global GDP, which, as we said, can mask collapse, Holonomics proposes bioregional coherence indexes.
Bioregional coherence indexes, measuring the health of specific regions.
It's exactly local, ecological, and cultural zones. These indexes would track things like local food self-sufficiency, biodiversity, water quality, social cohesion, durability of infrastructure within that specific place. The goal is to create socioeconomic scaffolds that support local self-organization, not dependency, fostering resilience, autonomy, stewardship at the regional level, rooting economies in place, responsive to their environment, accountable to their communities. It's a total rethink of prosperity, shifting from endless stuff to holistic well-being within living limits.
It's really fascinating to imagine measuring success with a gross coherence index instead of GDP. Imagine if policies were judged on symmetry, integrity, and mutual flourishing. Instead of asking how much GDP growth, the question becomes, how does this enhance long-term relationships, ecological balance, future well-being? It would challenge everything, wouldn't it? Business models, education, politics. Right, so to give us a more concrete path, Lilien outlines the Degrowth Covenant. He calls it not just a list of things to cut, but a harmonic framework for re-entering planetary resonance. That's a beautiful image, like we've lost the rhythm, and this is how we find it again.
It's a powerful image, isn't it? Re-entering resonance. And these 10 principles are meant as that guide towards coherence-centered governance, energy, culture, and life design. A moral and practical compass for building something regenerative. Let's dive into them. First principle, restoration over extraction. This commits us to systems that heal rather than exploit, a direct challenge to the landfill economy's take-make-waste logic. It means what was broken by the extractive logic must be restored through relational coherence, not mechanistic compensation. So not just fines for pollution, but actively regenerating the damaged system, rebuilding its health.
Like actually healing the land or the river, not just paying a penalty.
Exactly. Reforesting clear cuts with diverse native species, not just monoculture plantations. Rehabilitating polluted rivers until they're thriving ecosystems again. Rebuilding fish stocks through careful management and habitat work. Active healing and reintegration.
Okay. Principle 2, time depth over acceleration. This tackles the frantic pace of modern life. Lilien says degrowth is not regression. It is resynchronization with planetary cycles. How does that play out?
It means embracing long-form design, ancestral time, and generational continuity over quarterly throughput. Slowing down. Valuing durability. Thinking in generations, not financial quarters. This affects everything. Urban planning buildings designed for centuries. Agriculture prioritizing long-term soil health over single-season yield. Cultural practices reviving crafts that emphasize longevity, connection to place. Building a legacy, not just hitting next quarter's target. Imagine furniture built to last 100 years, infrastructure serving 20 generations. Third, coherence as value. This is where the Gross Coherence Index comes into play practically. It says all policies, technologies, and institutions must serve the metric of gross coherence. The key question for any action becomes, how much symmetry, integrity, and mutual flourishing does this action sustain? It forces evaluation through the lens of holistic system health. Does this contribute to overall balance, or just isolated gain that might cause hidden damage elsewhere?
So a new technology wouldn't just be judged on efficiency, but its whole system impact.
Precisely. Impact on soil, water, community, workers' health, long-term resilience. The whole picture. Fourth, local regeneration over global dependence. As you said, degrowth empowers the bioregion. This principle argues that food, materials, water, and culture must be local in rhythm, style, and resilience. The aim is to reduce vulnerability to fragile global supply chains, foster local autonomy. Each region becomes a resonance node, not a consumer cell. So instead of just passively consuming global goods, each unique bioregion becomes a vibrant center of production, innovation, culture, tailored to its own context.
Like communities growing more of their own food, using local materials, becoming more self-reliant.
Exactly, reducing dependence on distant, vulnerable systems. Fifth, nested economies over linear markets. This moves beyond that simple take, make, dispose line. It says, we build nested cycles of exchange where each economic layer reinforces regeneration. Think interconnected loops, like in nature. Waste from one process feeds another, minimizing waste, maximizing resource use. He says, from household to commons, from bioculture to planetary, coherence compounds inward and outward.
So actions at one level reinforce others, like composting at home helps a community garden, which supports local food.
Yes, creating these virtuous, self-reinforcing cycles of increasing coherence at all scales. A local bakery, using local flour, sending waste to feed local animals, building these tight, interdependent webs.
Number 6. Community circles over corporate hierarchies. This hits at power structures. You said power must be decentralized, relational, and accountable. A huge shift.
Monumental. It means governance emerges from local coherence nodes, not abstract financial command structures. Power shifts towards local communities. Decisions made collaboratively, responsive to local needs, accountable to the people and ecosystems affected. More participatory, democratic. Prioritizing local knowledge, relationships. Imagine neighborhood assemblies deciding on local resources, not directives from a distant corporate HQ. Fostering real ownership. Seventh, repair culture over obsolescence. Directly counters the throwaway culture. Tools, homes, systems, and traditions are designed for repair, reuse, and reintegration. A fundamental cultural shift, cherishing things, maintaining them, extending their life. The culture of waste is replaced by a culture of reverent stewardship, encouraging repair skills, available spare parts, valuing longevity over novelty. Think community repair hubs being common, cultivating respect for material things.
That feels very different. All right, number 8, sacred limits over false expansion. This one feels really countercultural in a growth-obsessed world.
It is. Lilien says degrowth affirms that limits are not constraints, they're harmonic boundaries of life. A radical reframe. Instead of seeing ecological limits carrying capacity, finite resources as obstacles to overcome, this principle sees them as essential for flourishing. Every ecological limit honored is a doorway to deeper meaning and creativity.
So limits aren't bad. They actually foster creativity.
That's the idea. Working within boundaries can spark incredible innovation, efficiency, stronger community bonds through sharing, deeper appreciation for what we do have. Shifting from endless taking to living abundantly within limits. Like a thriving garden finding abundance within its walls. Limits become the conditions for life's flourishing. 9th, commons over commodification. This argues vital resources, water, soil, seeds, code, air, and knowledge, must be protected as commons, not extracted as products. Managed collectively for all, ensuring equitable access, long-term health, instead of being privatized for profit. Commons governance becomes the spine of future law. Legal frameworks prioritizing collective management, preservation, universal access. Think water as a public trust, open source knowledge freely shared.
And the 10th, the final one, which sounds like it ties it all together, the covenant of reciprocity. Asking the question, does this reciprocate with Earth, community, and future generations?
Yes, this is the ultimate ethical and practical test. The binding principle. If an economic activity doesn't reciprocate, if it takes more than it gives back, creates harm without equivalent benefit to the planet, community, or future, then it is incoherent and must be redesigned. It's a powerful, actionable moral compass, evaluating everything against its capacity for mutual flourishing, long-term health, not just short-term gain for a few. Does this factory replenish the water it uses, enrich the soil, strengthen the community, leave a positive legacy? If not, it fails the test. A different way must be found. It demands an economy based on giving back, on being in right relationship.
That is such a comprehensive and, challenging framework. It really paints a picture of a completely different way of organizing ourselves. Moving from taking to giving and renewal, it feels like, maybe a possible way forward. So after laying all that out, Lilien circles back to a pretty stark point. He argues the landfill economy, it's just beyond fixing. He insists there's no reforming the landfill economy. There is only replacement. That's unambiguous. Incremental changes, greenwashing, they won't cut it.
Yeah, that's a critical takeaway. He's really emphasizing that you can't just patch up a system built on fundamentally unsustainable, incoherent principles. Its very design, its ontology, is geared towards extraction, throughput, short-term gain at the expense of long-term health. So real change needs a complete overhaul, replacing the core operating system, not just tinkering with the apps. And he's clear this replacement isn't about waiting for some magic technology, techno-illusions, he calls them, while the underlying logic stays the same. It has to be rooted in fundamental shifts in principles, a deep realignment. And he outlines those core replacement principles, contrasting them with the landfill economy. First, relational coherence over transactional gain. Prioritizing healthy relationships, social, ecological over isolated financial deals, valuing trust and balance above profit, then regenerative cycles over throughput loops, designing systems that are circular, that heal and renew, mimicking nature instead of the linear take, make, dispose model. Next, ecological embeddedness over global abstraction, reconnecting economies to the real limits and context of specific places, bioregions, instead of the detached logic of a global market ignoring local impacts. And finally, ancestral time over quarterly profit. Embracing that time depth principle, prioritizing long-term flourishing, future generations, wisdom from the past over the tyranny of short-term financial results. He connects this replacement idea to the degrowth spiral. He pictures it as a structured upward regenerative trajectory, moving away from destructive acceleration towards slow, life-centered restoration.
An upward spiral, not a collapse. That's a much more hopeful image.
It is. It counters that narrative of doom or just falling apart. It suggests a conscious, intelligent movement towards a more coherent, regenerative future, a spiral of growing wisdom, integrity, sustainability, even if material throughput goes down.
It's powerful. He says, degrowth is not a loss. It is the return of coherence to its rightful center. So it's not about deprivation. It's about rediscovering what truly matters and aligning our systems with that, finding our way back to balance, harmony, resonance, realizing abundance lies in connection, not just accumulation. Wow, what an incredible deep dive today. We really started by taking apart Lillian's landfill economy, didn't we? Seeing how neoliberalism acts as a coherence-destroying ideology, how markets have that fatal ontology, unable to see the future or interconnections. We question renewables, seeing them as rebuildables, caught in that entropic acceleration trap, and understood the whole system as planned obsolescence masquerading as progress, where growth can mask invisible collapse.
And then we made that big shift, exploring degrowth as recoherence. Not just less, but a different whole. Moving from throughput to durability, novelty to systemic intelligence. We unpacked holonomic economics with that radical value equation, resonant longevity, interrelational integrity, time depth, and production as regenerative participation, replacing GDP with the gross coherence index. And finally, we walked through the degrowth covenant. Those 10 principles, restoration over extraction, sacred limits, reciprocity offering a blueprint for a civilization centered on coherence, balance, mutual flourishing, ethical embeddedness. Lillian's overarching message really hits home. Let us re-enter the harmony of Earth not as rulers, but as stewards of coherence. Degrowth is our path home. It underscores that deep philosophical shift in holonomics, operating with entropic accountability and resonant ethics, pushing us beyond just numbers to rethink our entire relationship with the world, being accountable, living in harmony.
So, here's something to think about. If our current system is built on this invisible collapse, as Lillian suggests, what small everyday actions could you maybe start taking? How could you redefine value in your own life? Maybe contributing to resonant longevity in your community, learning to repair something, supporting a local regenerative farm. What might embracing time depth look like in your own decisions? Definitely some powerful things to mull over until our next deep dive.